All right. Hey guys, we got a wonderful guest, a friend of mine that I've made friends with on LinkedIn. He's got a wonderful background in building project management and maintenance in all aspects. A very educated gentleman who's going to help us out today, Curtis Osiowy. And Curtis, why don't you just tell us a little about your background and your expertise so our audience will know, you're the real deal.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction, Andrew. It's a pleasure to meet you here, in somewhat face to face here for the first time. Though time zones separate us, and I feel this is a really good opportunity to connect. So I have a kind of a weird and sordid background. I got into construction, shortly out of high school, and I was doing fire sprinklers. In there, I went back to school, did some civil construction, and initially I was chasing a geology degree. After that, I did a few kind of environmental related projects on the job site and, ran a few crews and decided I wanted to do some more schooling in the environmental kind of end of things. Went back to a place called SAIT here nearby in Calgary, and I spent better part of a decade working in environmental remediation and contracting. So I did a lot of work with dealing with water issues, dealing with soil issues, and prepping sites and inspecting sites. And from there, here in Alberta, we kind of got hit with the peak oil thing, and as far as price in about 2014. And I wanted to try and move to something that was a little less boom and bust. And so an opportunity came up for me to go work for a fairly large operator here in Calgary, and it was a pretty bottom of the totem pole position, but I went in there, did some extra school for that, and began to work my way up the ranks. I got a really neat opportunity there to work on the construction development of a AAA class building, and meanwhile kind of cut my teeth on some other buildings around the downtown area that were kind of a B class level. We ran them, I think, to a higher standard than that, but yeah, definitely some interesting properties and wonderful people. So all that said, that's a really short synopsis, but yeah, it kind of brought me trial by fire, as I kind of said to you earlier. Came in, got thrown into the thick of things in the completion of this building. We had a pretty important tenant coming in. It was a named tenant, and the thing had to be running on the date they got in there. There was some big penalties. So at that point, the building was intended to have about 18, almost 19,000 points that we monitor there. And so that's referring to the number of sensors and controls and things that the computer actually looks at on a regular basis and is pulling and to bring information back to run the building. And when we actually got into the site, a lot of the automation wasn't complete yet. So literally for a couple of weeks, me and the person who at that time was the chief were running up and down the building, physically turning valves to manage the cooling, and
Oh my gosh.
it was pretty wild. But we got it going, and over the next couple of years there, we got it lined up pretty good. There's a great chief there now running the property, and it's a pretty neat place. It's a pretty incredible investment in downtown Calgary. So proud to have worked there and proud to have worked with the people that were there. And learned a lot. It was pretty neat, kind of seeing what at that, when it was completed there. April Fool's Day 2017 is when it was completed and opened, and got to see that thing, basically come from, conception in the ground to a functional property. And it was pretty incredible experience. So all that said, we kind of wanted to talk about how, maybe some things that I learned there and in some of the other properties could be applicable to someone who's looking to invest, right?
Yeah. We have a lot of people in my network, as you know, they're going to buy apartment buildings, multifamily buildings, various sizes and various classes. And one of the feedbacks we get is, it's really important to do the due diligence.
Yeah.
Really, really important. A lot of, not all, but a lot of the failed deals, it comes up because of, the roof, the electrical, the plumbing, the foundation, these
Yeah.
kind of issues. Not so much the little stuff like, GFIs, we talked about that, but just in general, talking to a lot of the construction guys or contractors and developers, they really notice that, guys like me that are more of a white collar book background, we don't know what to look for. We don't
Yeah.
really understand the questions to ask. So if you could maybe just go into like, if you were advising me, if I was going to go buy a Class A building, in Dallas, Texas, what kind of things would you be telling me to cue in on when I'm walking the building and in the process of hiring like inspectors and, just so I would be better informed?
Yeah. I mean, all this is dependent upon, what's the scale of the project you're purchasing and how much you're willing to, put out on your due diligence. But I would say high importance on quality consultants, whether it's, strict discipline engineers or if it's someone that's doing a broad-based overview of the project. There's some good ones out there. And if you have someone that can look at, each kind of major aspect of the building and give you a good overview, executive summary, that's typically your best place to start. I like to kind of mention, I like to look at the building as kind of an organism. You've got all these different systems that keep it alive and keep the people inside of it alive and help them, either flourish or not. And, really the biggest thing in the operation is moving heat and fluids around. So you've got, and fresh air. So making sure that, firstly, like you said, the roof is super important, critical, but it's not necessarily the end of a deal. Like that's something that, it can be expensive, but it can be, compared to the cost of the building, relatively less than like a major envelope issue, or a major piping replacement. And some of those things, like if they're not managed well, everything deteriorates over time. And depending on, quality of materials originally used, what was the maintenance schedule, what was done over the course of the life of that organism or building, will, dictate its longevity. I mean, concrete piers and things for the most part last pretty long as they're, kept clean and dry. But when you get into your major systems, whether it be for fire sprinklers or it be for heating piping, any other loops for cooling or other heat pumps or other things that you've got going on, if the water, the fluids aren't maintained in there, then you're probably going to run into issues at some point, right? If any of those things. So you want to kind of go run down the system. So you got your roof, your envelope, your incoming water, because you're going to, in a high-rise scenario, you're going to have some distribution pumps of some sort and some systems to manage that. Then you've got your, in Dallas, you're going to be definitely looking at cooling. So I would pay some close attention to the life of your chillers. A bad indication if there's a lot of stop starts.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so that's a simple thing you can look at. But yeah, you want to look at when are any of these major pieces of equipment. So you've got your incoming water. So any of those major pumps, those are vital to getting water, not only to necessarily your drinking water in the building, but for getting it to the, maybe top of house or wherever you're distributing your water for your chilled system and your cooling towers, because that sort of thing, those high-rise, like express risers, all of those things, if they're not maintained, like if the water's not maintained in there, you can end up with some big costs to start ripping a bunch of piping out of the building. Same goes for fire sprinklers, which, that something that you don't want to mess around with life safety, right? So not only for the fact that it's life safety, but the fact that that water is stagnant. So it doesn't really get flushed unless you have someone go there and doing the regular maintenance programs. So
what for you would be a deal killer?
Pardon me?
What for you would be a deal breaker? If you were my, if you were my consultant and, we're doing this, this property and, this hypothetical deal we're talking about, and you're doing a B plus, a B, A class building, 164 units. What would be the kind of thing that you found, and you'd be coming to me saying, whoa, this might be a deal killer for you?
Back to the organism analogy, your fuels that are coming in. So really electricity in a lot of cases is that you want to look at your main switchgear and your backup generator if applicable, and look at those and your risers for that. What's the materials going into those risers? Is it old aluminum? Is it in good shape? You can have risers that haven't been tightened or maintained, and that'll come up on a report. Most people that are doing an electrical report really will monitor that sort of thing. Have your distribution panels, are they, are loads balanced? Do you have a bunch of pony panels? When you walk into an electrical room, is it a big mess or is it clean? It should be clean. Like it should be like lick the floor clean in those spaces.
Okay. Yeah,
And that's a good indicator for any mechanical space. If it looks neglected, and that's probably a good indication that someone hasn't been through there regularly.
So, like for a lay person like me, we're looking at the signage, we're looking at, how the building's painted, the garage, the parking lot, if it's paved or, the gates working, that, the lay person stuff, we're looking at the interior of the units, the pool deck, is it okay? A layperson like us, we're not as inclined to be opening up the electrical panels, but it's definitely something we should be doing, correct? Well, in concert with the inspector, probably, right?
Yeah. You want to, if you can, stick your nose in as many corners as you can, because sometimes skeletons are hiding in those electrical closets. If it was from, if I was in a position to be buying a large property like that, especially something with a lot of glazing, envelope is critical too. That for me would be probably a big, determinant if I was gonna, pull the trigger on something, is make sure you have a good report on the envelope. Like, what's the status of the glazings? Are they all due for replacement?
What are glazings?
So like the glass. So like,
okay,
exterior glass. Because that can get really pricey all of a sudden if you're having to bring in cranes, let alone materials, because a lot of it does come from China these days, and it's quite expensive. So so high quality glazings, or at least look at your time horizon for investment. If you're going to have to suddenly come in and do say you're on a B class building and it's 20 plus stories, suddenly you have to do $5 million per side to replace glazing, inside of your time horizon, then it's a big project, right?
Yeah, that would definitely kill the financial metrics of the deal.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's great. So we kind of went over things for syndicators or general partners to look at when they're looking at purchasing a building. Let's just say now we've gone and bought the building and things are going well.
Mm-hmm.
What are the areas that you think that like a lay person like me might be missing in terms of where to spend capital expenditures to save money in the long run? Like, we were mentioning water and electrical savings, but quality of life improvements too for tenants are important, because in the syndication space, what we're really trying to do is I want to bump up the rents, and it goes beyond just the market is hot, or the building 2 blocks away is charging X. We really want to have the tenants have a great experience, because I don't want to have turnover. I want to keep you there and have you pay the $100 more a month, or whatever it is we're trying to increase. So what are the things like a layperson like me might be missing in terms of opportunities to either lower costs or just generally improve the the experience for the residents?
Well, I'd say so 2 facets of it. So when you're looking at just your op costs and also performance of the building, again, I would start at the envelope and look if there's any easy fixes, because whether you're in a hot or cold climate, minimizing interaction with a big temperature change between outside and inside can help you save money, right? So if you have a plan, like for example, glazing improvement, and that is a planned maintenance on the building, like that might, or if it's something that they've just done, look at the quality of the windows, you know, is like, what's the emissivity or the R value on the windows? Look at anything surrounding that. Is it well insulated, or are there small opportunities where, you know, if you had the right consultant come in, you could, you know, improve the R value on a low cost. Sometimes that's something that can happen. That's going to save you money whether you're heating or cooling. So
like you're talking about like tinting,
insulation potentially,
or okay.
Yeah. So yeah, you like if you're in a cold climate like me, up in Alberta here, you tend to lose a lot of energy to the exterior in the winter, right? So anyways you can kind of, you know, keep your heating in and keep from losing it, or vice versa in a hot climate like say we're in Dallas, trying to keep the heat out. So there's all sorts of ways you can get creative with that. But I would say that that's a good place to start and look at if there's any simple improvements, because a lot of times there's opportunities for that. Because, you know, a lot of these buildings, if you're buying something a little older, we're looking at stuff that was built in a time when fuel and stuff was cheaper. And, you know, whether you're on board with ESG or any of that stuff or not, the numbers, you can't argue it's cheaper to be efficient. So looking for ways where you can reduce heat loss or heat gain, simply, you know, one of the simplest things too is like, if you're on a south facing side of the building, if the tenants are into it, you know, send them a message, say, hey, you know, it might save you some money is using your blinds. You know?
Wow. That's a good idea. That's smart.
Yeah. Simple things is that like can save you a lot of money. I mean, if you've got a big south facing up in the northern hemisphere anyway, you got a big south facing set of glass, you know, you're going to gain a lot, even in the winter in a lot of cases. So being aware of your environment and the building itself is critical. I think you'll see, and it continues to be, there's a lot of improvements in automation, right? So you want to have as good and timely feedback as you can about all the spaces that you're managing. Now, of course, if you're in a residential setting, individuals, likely it's not a central plant scenario. It's going to be like maybe a heat pump or a small AC unit or a series of split units or something for that tenant if it's a separate tenant. But a lot of times you may have a central plant that provides hot water. You may have a central plant that provides chilled water to, you know, be it split units or heat pumps or other things. Being able to see what the whole building is doing, and by that, when I say that, I mean getting temperature feedback from the room, maybe getting some, you know, accurate outdoor air temperatures and things like that. You can combine all that and you know, tweak the best performance out of your system, so you're not, you know, necessarily running with the gas and the brake on, as I like to call it. Sometimes you'll get in shoulder seasons and you have to do a bit of that, but you want to try and be running, you know, you know, as much cooling as you can, but not pushing beyond what you need. And that's going to save you a lot of electricity and costs. And same within the winter, anytime you can save gas by, you know, running a slightly lower temperature heating, as long as you're satisfying the call for temperature. And maybe I'm going a little quick on this, but yeah, if you can, you know, basically provide as little cooling or as little heat as you can and still be more than satisfying keeping the tenant comfort, which is job one, you're going to save money, right? And all that goes back to, again, you know, getting good data back, good controls, a good team. If you are able to have a team managing that property, the automation is basically going to be an extension of the knowledge of the people there, right? and if it's working properly, it will, you know, it will serve them and your tenants well. So I think that's something that sometimes gets overlooked. I've seen in a lot of cases, you know, it's sometimes a plunge to take, you know, a pneumatic floor, for example, in an office building and go in and put in DDC controls. But fortunately, the costs are coming down quite a bit on that, you know, by the minute almost, because there are people trying to compete for that space. There's some big companies that tend to dominate it, but there are others now with more open source kind of control strategies, and they all really in the end kind of function the same. And it's something to definitely consider. If you have a CapEx expenditure and you can put it on controls, I would say in most cases, consider it for sure, because over the course of your building, you will realize gains by being able to control things a little tighter.
You know, one area that you know, the low hanging fruit that guys like us want to do is you know, some of the older buildings, especially, one of the first things they want to do is, you know, swap out all the toilets for the water savings. You know, other than that low level kind of obvious thing, what would an apartment building owner do on the larger scale to try to, you know, lower their water costs?
I would say, again, controls over your cooling tower is going to be big, right? Because that's where you tend to lose a lot. And in order to keep it clean, if you don't have a good treatment program, keeping the water in that system clean, you can tend to waste a lot of water to try and keep it clean, because a lot of people will tend to flush more and you'll waste a lot of chemical. And so not only are you going to have higher input costs on water, but you're going to have higher treatment costs. So working with finding good providers for that is really critical across the board on water treatment, whether it's for boilers or for cooling towers or for just your closed loops. All of that stuff is really critical in automating well, especially like on your because you're going to have some sort of, usually you're going to have some sort of automated dump on your cooling tower that's going to flush, you know, some of your wastewater in there. As what happens is over time you're going to end up with a high electric connectivity, so you're going to have more basically particles. Think of it, salts and things that build up in the water, because as you're evaporating away, you're leaving behind precipitate, and then also you're bringing in chemical to, you know, keep the integrity of your piping and things. So over time, the water gets more and more concentrated with salts and things. And so in order to abate that, because the more salt in there, the more corrosive it becomes to lines and things, so you want to dump that stuff out. And so having a good and accurate you know, sensing system for that concentration and all of your treatment, and the ability to tightly control what you dump and when, and keeping in a nice range, will actually over time, you'll save a lot of water doing it properly.
One of the things, you know, we talked about offline before the episode started was you know, making sure that the inspector you're hiring or the consultant you're hiring, you know, really knows the local jurisdictions.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could just go into that, or if you know any, you know, funny anecdotes, that kind of thing, about jurisdictional issues.
So I worked with a large international company, and they had some really great like Canadian level inspectors and consultants that would do reports for us. And some of those reports are absolutely really well done and really thorough and awesome. But there are some things that, you know, there's things that are unique to the local Calgary market. There's unique to, I'm sure, where you're at in Hawaii. And in every case, there's going to be nuance there. So it is worthwhile. If you're getting to a property, there's going to be some records there. So look at the paperwork, look who's looked at the building. And it'd be worthwhile to maybe, if you see some names like engineering firms that have been on some major projects, if they've been repeat names, maybe even give them a call. They may or may not be willing to divulge stuff to you, but in a lot of cases, there can be a lot of insights gleaned there, because sometimes, even if you get like one of the best consulting firms out there, if they're national level and they're flying someone in from afar to check out the building, they're only going to get, maybe 2-3 days there to walk the pipe and check the place out for you. They're going to do a fantastic job, likely, but there's things that maybe they don't know about the building. It's worthwhile to talk to the operators too, even. But if you can get a hold of anyone that's worked on any major projects, or even the commissioning the building, if it was new, from one of the major engineering firms on it, I would look at the mechanical. That's my bias, and structural typically. If you can talk to anyone that was on the project, they can usually give you some insights on the building and where there might be blind spots as well.
I like that. That's interesting. That's definitely interesting. Because a lot of times we're in a real hustle from the time that we're making a letter of intent to
Mhm.
getting the offer accepted, to running around the world trying to get all these investors to put money in, to closing the deal. It's like a three-ring circus trying to, all of a sudden, a bunch of guys fly out to a city and get an inspector, and then walking all these units, and it's like a madhouse.
Yeah.
It's good to know that the ideas are like, these are some things you can look for so that our audience would know better, like, these are some potential issues we're getting into. When you're working with the property manager, what are some issues that like questions that an investor owning a building should be asking, or if they're not getting feedback on a certain level or a certain type of report, what would be a red flag if for an investor not hearing from the property manager?
I mean, really, for me, envelope is a big one because it can spiral in cost really quickly, especially if it's a high rise. And by that, I'm talking about, exterior cladding and exterior glazing, because those sorts of things can, some people will tend to overlook, if they are due for a maintenance, it's usually for a reason. And, like a dam, little leaks and little things over time will eventually turn into a big, waterfall of a problem.
How often does the glazing, the windows have to be maintained?
That it depends on the construction design.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. So, in a lot of cases they can be for the lifetime, but if you're buying a building from, say, mid last century, you probably had units that have been replaced. Lots of those are on, can be on a 10 to 15-year program. Sometimes I've seen buildings that were done in, we were replacing windows in one not too long ago that were there since the 70s. It depends on the quality of the units. Seals will go over time on lots of them. And so you'll inevitably have to budget for some glass replacement. But the bigger thing too is where they're actually mounted, is that still sound and secure?
oh,
Yeah. So sometimes you need to revamp the mounting situation. There's little things. So those are all cues to look at in your reports. Like, so pay attention, look at the high level categories, whether it be roofing, glazing and envelope, your main mechanical systems. They'll usually give you a blurb in these high level reports about, your boilers and your chillers, which, your big ticket items. But if there's major air handlers, if there's large ones, that maybe provide for the building, look and see, like, they will give you an age of the motor, and lots of times they'll give you scores for when those things need to be replaced.
oh.
So take note of those things, because they are worthwhile. They can also help you form your cap spending plans into the future, right? So that's what
Yeah, it's a big thing because we're trying to do this 5-year plan, which I have certain opinions about pro formas. I mean, it's guesswork, but you're trying to do educated guesswork for your investors. But if you really don't know what the cash outlays are going to be to keep this building up to snuff, are the last thing I want as an investor is a surprise. Hey, Andy, we're not going to be able to pay the December, January, February distribution because we unexpectedly have to replace X, or we have to do this program. As much as possible, and I get that nothing's perfect in life. You'd like to reasonably have the pro forma, the financials reflect reality, the reality of real maintenance on a building, not
Yep.
just, depending, not relying only on the property manager to tell you, oh yeah, don't worry, you can just put in this percent, it'll be fine. We get into that problem a lot in the single family world where, there's little Excel spreadsheets that are, gurus make up, and you just kind of plug your rent in and plug your taxes, and then, kind of you hit enter and it kind of spits out your report, and it tells you every year, account for 8% for this expense. And then, it's all lovely and good because a couple of years you don't have that expense, and all of a sudden you get hit with, a new boiler, and you're like, whoa, it's a little more than that 8% savings that I've been allotting away. And granted, hopefully it doesn't happen in years 2 or 3, right? But that's kind of where we're going with this. Now,
Absolutely.
Curtis, since we're getting a little into time, and I know people have short attention spans, my audience is more of a lay person audience. Is there any last takeaways about mindset or specifics that you want to kind of impart upon, regular people like us that are, looking to buy buildings or invest with the people that are buying buildings?
Uh, yeah, I'd say to your thing, you just kind of transition from there. It's a good segue. Is like contingency is a good thing to have to a certain degree. If you can maintain some, you know, as much as you can. The building is an organism, just like you can have an accident, a health problem, any of us at any time. So obviously, yeah, our insurance is important, and and trying to be preventative as we can. So having a good team that's managing the property and is performing their logs. I'm not paid by these people, but I really appreciate them. They have a very simple app. It's called Log Check. Implementing that on your site, so your daily logs or catalog, can be a really powerful tool. And there's a lot of despite it's a very simple app. And basically, as you walk the building to do your daily checks, you check them off. At the end of the day, if you have multiple shifts, it'll send you a report and a summary of things. You can have it so you set all the parameters of what you're entering for it. But it's a very valuable tool for the ops team. And if it depends on the property manager. Some will like to see it and some won't, and you can tailor the report. But those sorts of things where you're keeping up all of your current paperwork. And if you're someone who's going to look and see, have they been doing their maintenance logs, right? The nice thing about a thing like log check is you can literally, from the day you start, you could send them a report for every single day and every single statistic that's been recorded by the team, right? So then it's like, okay, boom, this is what we've been doing, right?
So Curtis, if you were on an investment team and you were charged with, hey, Curtis, you be the asset manager. We already got the financial guy to do the underwriting. We already got a couple of guys to raise capital for investors, and you're the asset manager. One of your big metrics would be you'd want to see this log report from your property manager.
I want to see what's their maintenance program like. Are they, there's a lot of ways to skin that cat, but the big thing, no matter how you're doing it, is there consistency and is it being recorded, right? And then you want to see on the major ticket items, like we spoke about, boilers, chillers, cooling towers, all that stuff. Water treatment to me is number one, because that extends the life of things for sure.
I really appreciate it, man.
On life safety. So have they got, major electrical reports, major fire sprinkler reports? Have those been done regularly? And has the maintenance that's been suggested in those been accomplished, or they've made plans to do it? So tear into those. Don't be afraid. It can be really, some bedtime reading for sure, but it's absolutely a worthwhile endeavor, no matter how dry.
The asset manager role on the general partner team, the person who's going to interface the most consistently with the property manager, it's the least glamorous of the positions, but it's oftentimes what I argue one of the most important positions, because the reason why deals don't do well often is a problem with the property management, or obviously the maintenance and operation of a building. So I really appreciate this. I can think of a couple of my friends that are asset managers, or people that are looking at those roles, and I think they're really going to enjoy this video. So I just wanted to thank you, Curtis, for your time, and we'll check in with you again. Hopefully I'll get some good feedback or questions from some of our listeners. And if anyone had a quick question, and I don't want to offer your work for free or something. If you want to hire Curtis, hire him as a consultant. Don't ask a bunch of free questions. But if it's a little simple thing like, what did this term mean, or what would you think if someone told you X? Curtis is a good guy. I'm sure he'd be happy to answer simple questions. How would my audience get a hold of you, Curtis? And don't give out your home phone number, but how would they get a hold of you?
Right now, easiest way is to find me on LinkedIn. I'm one of your friends' connections on there, obviously. So yeah, just track me down that way is probably the easiest. And I'm happy to answer any questions or, pontificate about all sorts of things. So
you have a great last name. It's very easy to find. That's a very specific last name. So I like that.
It's my weird Polish cross to bear. So
it's great. It's a great name. It's better than Smith. People can find you easy, Curtis. Thanks again, Curtis. And then I'll be bugging you on LinkedIn, and I'm sure we'll chat again, buddy. Have a good one.
Really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.